Well, I want to thank you all for being here today to have a conversation about real issues that are happening to men, right? We're talking about suicide. So what I really want to do is have a conversation around what does that mean for you? And why is it difficult for us men to share our feelings or even to talk about suicide?
You know, we as men, I think we understand we don't really share feelings. We don't.
Correct.
I don't think we need to, but it's a must nowadays, right? Like we understand, like we go through a lot of things too. Our coping mechanisms is to not talk about
To
it,
avoid it,
to
right?
go to the room, and to just be silent. There's a lot of pressure going around, right? I think that someone is experiencing so much, like thinking so irrationally, like the thoughts is just going quick, right? And so, one is identifying like what those thoughts are, right? It's like what's making you feel this way, what's causing this feeling, right? And if you can snap out of it, then that could also be another gateway to like to not think about suicide, right? Oftentimes it's irreversible too, right? Like it's already there, and unfortunately some people do take action. I think now it's more important to now discuss like what can we do to not get you to think about to getting of that point, right? And so I think about the word suicide, there's a lot, and I think that there are resources out there that can help us, that can help you, that can help me, that can help like especially young men and those that identify as young men to get help.
So how was it for you all growing up, having the ability to share how you felt?
I was just raised by my grandmother. I didn't see her as a model of somebody that I should follow when it came to expressing my feelings because she didn't look like me, right? She wasn't my age. So I looked around at people who did look like me, who were my age, or people that were older, because those are the ones that I wanted to model my expression after. Which wasn't always the healthiest, because sometimes those are the dudes in the corner, you know what I'm saying? Sometimes those are the people that you think are the ones that are the definition of power, or definition of what a man's supposed to be. But it was the women saying like, hey, turn left. You know what I'm saying? Like this is the way that is the healthier way to do things.
It's funny how you say that, because while you were saying that, I was thinking, you know, when we're raised, I feel like as Latino men, the older generation, were meant to be like this tough, you know, macho persona, I guess you could say. You know, when you're a kid, you fall off your bike, or, you know, you hit your head on something. You know, young boys, they'll still, especially your father or some man, they'll tell you, stop crying. You know, you're going to be a little girl? Stop crying. Like, sure, we're in pain. Like, when we're young, what do you expect us to feel? So they tell you that you're going to be a little girl. Like, you stop crying. Only girls cry. We learn to like suck it up and make that ugly face and not try to cry. So I feel like when you're young, you're a sponge. So it's like when you hear that, it sticks with you as you get older.
Right, yeah. Why is it so difficult for us Latinos to express how we feel, or to even share the fact that we potentially are contemplating suicide?
I think like what you said is like we hear that the entire time growing up, like, oh, don't cry. I didn't really hit you. Want me to really hit you? Because I grew up in an abusive household, so like I got told that a lot. Like, oh, I can make you really cry. And so that was when I was like, yeah, I didn't cry for a very long time. There was times when someone asked me like, when's the last time you cried? I was like, shh. This was like in my 20s, and I was just like, I couldn't even tell you because I stopped a long time ago because I was told no. It is a generational thing, so like they were just taught that way. So that's what you learn, and then after a while, you're like, that person you thought was like was amazing and was like doing the right thing. You find out like no, they weren't. Like they were like just hiding it, and they're dealing with stuff that no one ever knew, and it's just like you kind of like lost hope in that person, but then you wanted to be that person that fixed it and changed it. Like I don't want to keep being that person, or I want to help the next group that's coming up to like be able to talk about it and not feel sad or like feel like you can't talk about it.
Yeah. So talking about shaping, talking about us as guys, let's talk about what masculinity is. When you talk about being a real man, expressing yourself, connecting, what is that like? Well, how would you define it?
I think, you know, being a man is, you know, just making sure that, you know, have the money, you know, like dress up well, and just like, especially hiding your emotions, right? Because no one cares. No one needs to hear it, right? You're a man, you can take care of it. You can do it on your own, right? You need to do all these things because society is depending on you, right?
So with that as a foundation, now we're gonna get a little deeper. We're gonna talk about suicide. It's a prevalent issue occurring right now. The ages between 18 and 24, since there's a census in 2021, is stating that the rate is increasing. So our youth are struggling, right? When we talk about suicide, what's coming to mind, and how does that apply to your cultural experience, to your cultural lens?
You know, I gotta be honest, I don't think I've ever thought about suicide because I felt that in the era that I was growing up in, I spent so much time trying to survive that the idea of suicide, for me at least,
Correct.
was never something that I thought about. I know it was a reality for a lot of people that I was growing up with, but I think for me personally, I just spent so much time trying to make it, trying to survive, trying to stay alive.
Right.
It might have been just like walking home
Yeah.
from my friend's house, crossing different gang lines, you know?
Right.
So this idea, I definitely got to the point in my life where I wanted to give up though. You know, maybe not necessarily end my life, but definitely got to the point where like, I want to quit.
Yeah.
I want this to end. Something needs to change.
Yeah, something was there that you have to kind of like leverage to encourage you. So other reactions to what is the thought, if you hear the word suicide, what comes to mind, or a cultural component that is attached to that word?
I'll go. So, two of my best friends, they were suicidal. They've talked about it to me before. One of my friends even has a scar still on her arm when she used to cut herself, and it was just like learning about that. And then like she had like the real traditional Mexican like upbringing where she was told, don't talk about it, it's not real. Her mom was one of those, her dad was the same way. And so it kind of, because of her and other friends, they were like, I've been more open to just listening to people and just like letting them talk. I think most people just want to be listened to, and like no one listens to them, and then they're upset, and that's where people get into that rabbit hole of just no one's helping me, I'm alone. And I get why suicide is appealing at that point.
So for you, Jose, what is when you hear the word suicide, what comes to mind, and how does that kind of connect with your culture?
Well, to be honest here, I would say 2023 didn't start off well. Going with a breakup that I was with for almost 5 years, and you plan your life with somebody, and then a feeling that that's not happening. And I feel like I'm 32, and I feel like I haven't really done everything that I wanted, and I just feel like I'm running out of time. And because of, literally it's been all 2023 and everything piling up on me, that there has been times where I have felt, I wouldn't say necessarily ending my life, but I've definitely have caused some harm to myself.
Yeah.
I've jumped in Lake Michigan late at night. My crosses I have a number of crosses, and they kind of have like sharp edges. There's been times where like I squeezed it real hard until my hand bled. I went and get tattoos just because of the pain. I always try to find an outlet to deal with things I'm going through, and it's hard to find something when it's before bed.
Correct.
So there's been times where I've left my house at 2, 3 in the morning because I couldn't stay home because I felt like I was just in a dark place. And it's gone to a point where I've felt nauseous. I can't eat, I can't sleep, I get headaches.
Yeah.
I said, and so it's not necessarily wanted to end my life, but the things I've done, I said, if it happens, it happens.
Yeah.
But I have been kind of dealing with it now. Recently, I started therapy. Recently, not a big reader. Recently,
Yeah.
I started reading up on books, I felt like I've lost myself, but I still am currently trying to find myself in that, or trying to currently find myself, just to get back to, maybe I won't fully be at peace with things, but just to have a sane mind continuing to move forward.
And thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable in front of other people that you just met. It's really important. So what advice can you give somebody who's potentially going through something that you are experiencing in the moment?
I would say let it out, especially talk to somebody. There's times where, I'm home alone, maybe I can't leave where I want. I would call a male friend, a female friend, just to get both perspectives on it. And there's times where I've called and I legit just bawled out and let it out, and everything I was feeling on the inside, it came out. And maybe I wake up and the problem is still there, but at least at that moment, I kind of feel a relief that everything I had on the inside is out, and I can continue with whatever I was doing, focus what I was doing at the moment.
Yeah. Expressing yourself, but also having a support system that's willing to listen to you, right? That's powerful. Okay, so kid, I want to ask you the same question I asked the rest of the participants here, or the rest of the guys. What is your thought around suicide, and how does that impact you personally or your culture?
As someone who multiple times have tried it, and I think the recent attempt was in January, right? I think, I can sympathize that January of 2023 wasn't the best start, right? It was quite the opposite, getting news from, like, very deep news. First ever girlfriend, right? Broke up at the time. We broke up, and, like, that was my first time, so I didn't know how to navigate those emotions, so we started thinking irrationally, right? That wasn't to say that was the one that started it, right? But a lot of different things, right? I think the other times where I bought like a 12-inch blade from Chinatown. Others were like pills from the cabinet that, like the orange cabinet, right? And then like the January one, just like taking the keys and just driving through Sablet Drive and just like at a very high speed and just saying like letting go of the wheel. The thing that brought me back was something really stupid. I was like, man, I forgot to get the groceries.
Wow.
Right? I forgot to get the groceries. Like, man, I forgot, like, we don't have milk at home. There's no eggs at home. I'm like, oh, man, like, I got to bring it home because, like.
Kind of snapped you out of it?
Right. It kind of snapped me out of it. Like,
Okay.
like, no one, like, everyone's at home hungry. I'm like, oh, man, I just got to go. Right. And so I did dive into a role where I had to take a responsibility to support the community that I live in, right? Running for something, right? And I still feel that to this day, right? That responsibility, right? Because as someone who wants to advocate, someone that wants to be an activist, someone that wants to help the community in ways that, one, they don't even want to be helped, or they want to be helped but in different ways, right? There's certain areas where you just gotta put that responsibility into, right? But going back to the suicide part, a lot of that's what just reminds me of like my attempts, right? The recent one especially, right? And it's like, what on earth drove me to that in the first place? Like, why did I ever think about that, right? In my past attempts, I didn't think I could ask for help, but in this attempt, right, I started selling my things. I started selling my equipment. I started selling my laptop, everything, because I was like, this is over. I cannot do this anymore. I cannot take the responsibility of being the kid from Pilsen anymore, right? It's like, I cannot do this anymore. And ultimately, like, I consulted with one of my friends. I consulted with other figures that I saw as role models at the time. And I said, I sold everything, like, and I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to take photos. I don't want to take video no more, right? And so what got me back into it was my age, was my dad. I'm 22, right? It's right to say that a 22-year-old can't think this, right? It's right to say that they can have these emotional, irrational thoughts, but it's also right and fairly to say, like, we survived slavery. We survived a lot of things to get to a point where, like, yo, we can turn this around. Like, we can actually make it. We can make it, right? And so I always bring up the example of my dad, right? It's like, he survived El Rio. He survived the attempts of trying to get here in the first place. He survived the culture where it was a lot of like, you need to get to the United States. You need to be here, right? So he's the black sheep of the family that turned us into the better, right?
All right, so Jose, kid, you shared information about your experience. Why do you both think it was so difficult for you to share this information beforehand?
I feel like we're afraid to be judged and how people will look at us. The example I always give is, a soda can or a soda bottle. The more you shake it, the more pressure it's under, it's gonna burst. And as men, I feel like, the more we hold in, eventually we're gonna pop, eventually we're gonna let it out. And I feel like sometimes, I learned to teach myself that letting it out, is a good way to feel better or let the pressure, relieve you.
So nowadays, I think we need to bring awareness to the potential that we have as young men and also women, because we survived a lot of our answers to get to the point right now. And bringing awareness to that, it's like, yo, we got this. We got this. Like, right now, we cannot think, like, we can acknowledge what happened in the past, but we need to also acknowledge what we can do right now in the future.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and how you're tying it all together, because I don't know about you all, but I grew up in a family that if there was an issue, the issue stood within the family. And if I had a concern, I was told, suck it up, you're a man, men don't cry. And a lot of these feelings that I had were also like suppressed. There's a lot of things that we talked about in our conversations that really need to be highlighted. And to add more, my father committed suicide when I was young. I had no experience meeting him, but I think part of that experience led me to be a behavioral health provider. Led me to understand that I came up and I was grown, I was raised in the streets, but also I could do something different on this end, right? One thing I wanna like really talk about, I guess the last question, I wanna see if you guys can give the people who potentially see this video some advice. And have in mind that maybe what we dealt with is very different what people are dealing with now, because they're dealing with technology. The isolation of being on the phone, the constant bombarding of information.
So nowadays we have social media, right? We have social media that is a big part in playing into our mental health, right? We see things that we want, we see things that, man, I wish I had this, but because I'm here, I can't do that, right? So you're like, man, this guy's living a better life, right? But also acknowledge, like, that might be a happy moment, but after that moment, it's like, So social media is a lie. Let's just point, it's a lie. They promote happiness, they promote all the good things, advertising, oh, get this, get that. It's all a lie, right? And so we all play a role in that, right? And very little times we see the reality. Another thing that I would say is to not ignore your emotions, right? Don't ignore the emotions, actually address it, right? At first, when you feel those emotions, right, it can be a little weird because it's just new, right? And so just address it, write it down, journal it, do poem, do art, smash a can into a wall, do something, but address the emotions, actually let them feel them and don't ignore them, right? I think now at times we're young men, right, and those that identify as young men, right, there's always a stigma of not sharing the emotions, but we have the resources now. There's free therapy, there's resources now that our parents didn't have back then, our ancestors didn't have back then, right? And I feel like with those resources provided, I think that we can.
So what if somebody comes to you? What is your role as the helper? Is it to give them advice? Is it to listen? What would you say that person needs from you?
So the term is, do you want to be helped, heard, or hugged?
Okay.
Right. So that's my question to them. Other times they don't want to be hugged, they just want to be heard. Or they want to be heard and hugged, right? So I think that's a good question to ask, right? Because helped is giving them advice, heard is actually listening, actually staying there, but hearing, right? Not listening, listening to the noise, but hearing, right? Hugging is to give them physical comfort, right? And that's my role, right? If someone were to come to me, you want to be helped, heard, or hugged.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And truly listening to understand, not to respond, right? So I like how you put it together, very simple and practical. So how about for you, Luis? If you think about your younger self or somebody who's potentially dealing with these feelings, or is not necessarily suicidal but needs to express something, what would you say to them? What would be your advice?
Yeah, definitely seek help. There are people who are professionals in this field, and I think that my first step that I would tell them to take is to seek somebody that could help them out. And I think that it's easier said than done, because a lot of people, it's very hard for them to go outside of themselves to seek help, to one, realize it, and then two, to make the ask, like they just have maybe never even did that process before, of actually asking somebody to help them. But that would be my first step, you know? And I think that my role would be to provide them with that resource and to say, hey, well, here are the numbers, or here's the websites, or here are the names of the people that you can go to, that you have access to seek the help.
Yeah. And what if you give that person advice and you say, hey, these are the resources, and they tell you, expressing my feelings is weak. That's for chumps, that's for somebody who has issues, that somebody has to go to the psych ward. What would be your response to somebody who you potentially think is struggling but gives you that response?
I say, well, then look what the alternative is. You know, you're coming to me. You already are seeking help.
Correct.
Like you've already completed the first step. You went to somebody you trusted, and now the person that you trust is giving you the next steps that you got to complete. So I would tell them, you're already doing the work. You just have to continue it, and everything that you've been taught and conditioned to think, as you can see, are really hurting you instead of helping you.
Yeah, that's powerful, because you're creating a paradigm shift. Now they're looking at what was weak, now it's strength, right? And I start identifying it as something that you can use to build off and grow and develop and whatnot. Because our community needs it, and our young men are suffering. You saw the stats, right? So that's perfectly put. Thank you for your insight. How about over here on this side? So what are we thinking? What advice would you guys give your younger version, or somebody who's potentially experiencing thoughts of suicide, or actually contemplate on actually carrying out a plan?
I think it's more understanding what you're really feeling. Originally, like, I was very angry and just mad a lot. I really wasn't angry or mad. It was more, I was just sad, and I was like, oh, learning like what your true feelings are is very beneficial, because then you realize how to kind of walk yourself through it. Like, why do I feel that way? Able to talk to yourself freely and have a conversation with it, and like truly, like, why does it really bother me? Like, why am I really that sad, or why am I really that mad? And then just having a conversation with yourself, and then having like a real support system. I remember in my early 20s, I thought I had a support system, but it was just friends that they like to dump on you, but when you try to dump on them, it was just like, they would just tell you, oh yeah, because my story now is gonna take over, and then you didn't really feel heard. Now I have a real support system where it's like, my friends will listen, we listen to each other, we don't jump in, and kind of his same style too, was like, is this a listening conversation? Is this a venting conversation? Are we shooting ideas, or like, what are we doing? That's the question now I ask most of the times, like, especially if they'll call me, they're upset, and I'm like, oh, what kind of conversation are we trying to have? Is this like you venting because you want to vent, or we're trying to find a solution? And so I think just navigating, understanding feelings, and like what true intentions are in these conversations with people.
Yeah. You said a lot of powerful stuff. You talked about feelings and emotions. Feelings is what's coming up, emotions your interpretation of that, right? So that's number one, is identifying that there's outlets and there's ways of sharing that information. And then you touched on support systems. How do you identify that those folks were not good for you? Even potential family members are not good for you. So how do you get to the point to say, you know what, George, these people are not for you. You may want to leverage other people.
I think it was just like, it was definitely time, because like they would just, like I said, they would just dump on you all the time, and you were trying to be there for them because you wanted to be that good friend, and you just let them always vent to you, and I was always there listening. You could call me like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, I'd be there, go pick them up, and then in the days where like you needed it, or myself, I needed it, I call them, they didn't answer or respond to a text, or even like didn't hit you up till the next day, and then when you try to talk to them about it, they would try to sympathize with you, but then they would try to take over the story and be like more about themselves now. So then after a while, I was just like, I just got tired of it. I was just like, no, this is not right. And then I didn't really I just slowly pulled back, and I just went off and found my own different friends and stuff. And I think it's just one of those realizations that you just have internally, is like, these people aren't the people you thought were there for you.
There's healthy people.
As much as you have that time, like, oh, we've had years together, and you want to be loyal to that, but at the same time, like, you're just hurting yourself in the end.
Right.
And you don't have to be mad at them. You just pull back a little bit, and you're just all good terms. That's
you identify that there's a small group that wants to be close, and other people that are associates and forth and so on.
Yeah.
To your point, right? You want to be heard and you want to be seen. So if that's not happening, there's not a sense of connection, right? That in the social system. So that's great. So how about for you, Jose? What would you say?
Yeah, seek help, whether if it's professional or someone you trust. I know when you tell people, oh, I'm seeking therapy or something like that, they automatically think, oh, he's crazy
Right, yeah.
or anything like that. So that it's not that you're crazy, that it's good that you're actually, seeking help just to better yourself. And I say for me, what's kind of helped me was, I don't have any kids, but I have about 15 nieces and nephews. My nieces, they're around my age, they have kids,
Okay.
so they look up to me. And not only that, I coach high school basketball and baseball, and the kids at the high school are also looking up to me as well.
Correct.
So, and there's been times where, the ones that have graduated, even the ones that are still in high school now, like, come up to me and tell me, man, coach, like, I really look up to you. I've heard Big Brother, and I've also heard a father figure. And I think at times we just got to remember, like, there's always people looking at us a certain way. There's other people that put us on this pedestal.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even matter what age. I have guys my age or around my age, even older, tell me that they look up to me and what I've done. Sure, maybe part of that is because of social media, and you put on, this front or this lie.
Right.
There's times where I feel hypocritical because like I said, I'm a good advice giver, but I'm not taking my own advice.
Right.
I'm still at home in a dark place, trying to find my own peace. I just need to really start just taking my own advice and remember that there's people looking up to me, and, I just have to find whatever it is bothering me, deal with it, whether it's seeking help,
Yeah.
however it is, head on, deal with it, because I want to help my brother. I want to help the next person after me. I want to help the younger generation, which is our future, and just to make sure that, everybody just has the right mindset.
And the beautiful thing about what you said is that we're all human, we're all flawed, we all have our ups, we have our downs. I've been doing this for over 20-something years, and there's days that I don't want to talk to anybody. There's days that I have to sit and watch TV and eat some kind of like comfort food, Puerto Rican food. But the important thing is that we're taking a step in the right direction, that every day is a new day. And the more we talk about these issues as men, the more younger people are going to continue looking up to you and to you and to you and to you and to myself. And then it's not going to be stigmatizing anymore, because that's something we deal with constantly. During COVID, we went from, meaning where I work, we went from seeing a handful of people to seeing overwhelming amount of young men and older adults that wanted to receive behavioral health services. And they were telling me, Jose, I don't know what else to do. I'm lost. I'm at my last straw. I don't know what to do. I don't know who to talk to. And it starts with these conversations, sharing information, being honest, being real. And that's another important piece too, that oftentimes people feel like they have to give the best advice in the world. What we can do is provide advice based on our own experience. And we don't have to use all these big words. It just has to keep it real, be human, be honest, and continue the conversation. So does anybody else have a comment?
Yeah, I think that we have so much potential to the point where like we can make things happen, right? There may be bad days out there, but it's not a bad life neither, right? So what I would suggest is there's help.
I think the most important thing is to recognize that you're not alone, that there's people that are experiencing this with you.
It's okay to talk about your feelings. We all have emotions. Just talk about your feelings and be honest with yourself.
We're men, we're strong, and it's okay for us to talk about suicide.
If there's anybody in need of resources, information, or support, I have 3 really good resources. The first one is NAM in Chicago. They have a whole bunch of information that the person can be educated. The second one, which is really pivotal, is 988. You can text or you can call if somebody has symptoms of suicide or really want to talk to somebody. And the last one is SMI Advisor. There's tons of information on diagnoses, on information on how do you provide care for a Latino, and anything else that you feel like is necessary at the moment. So those are important things, and thank you all for sharing this information, because I think it's valuable and it's extremely needed at this point.